but I felt this guttural fear, like something's gonna get me.
Hey friends, this is Brandon Spain, and you're listening to The Unrefined Podcast, where we unravel mysteries, share perspectives, and navigate the rich landscapes of the seen and unseen together. We would love for you to connect with us on social media. You can find those links and how to subscribe to our members-only exclusive portal by visiting unrefinedpodcast.com. Now, for this week's episode. All right. This week, we were delving into the topic of little people, all kinds of creepy and supernatural and just stories. We have a really awesome guest in the studio today that's going to probably freak us out a little bit, but also entertain and edify us as well. So, but first, with me in the studio, your other hosts are Lindsay Waters and BT Wallace. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Yeah. And our special guest, who is no stranger to the supernatural. And he has so many stories, and I can't wait to hear them all. It is Nick Rico. How you doing, Nico?
Doing good. How y'all doing?
We're doing well. So when I first reached out to you, you told me you had a little people story, which I didn't even know that because I didn't get that episode because I don't think I was a member yet. And so I didn't hear your podcast. And we had a lady on one time about little people, but there was just some, I'll just be polite. There was some problems.
Okay. Because the subject, depending on which race you encounter, because there's various races. That's what a lot of people who research this won't really want to dive into because there are many races of them, but it's not as black and white as people think.
Well, the world's not. That's why.
Exactly.
God sees everything black and white, and there are black and white things in life, but there is gray too. And so we like to explore that gray, particularly in Christian fringy spiritual circles as well. And so we're not afraid to push the envelope. There are some things that are like lines drawn, but they're way out there. So just get us started. Tell us your first experience or what happened. You had an experience in Chile when you were young. Tell us that story, or just give us some background. Yeah.
Okay. Let me first start off by praying over everybody.
Yes, go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
And I say that because this subject has a tendency of bringing in these entities.
Yep.
So, God, I just pray for a spiritual Faraday cage around anybody listening here, Lord. Anybody technology here, Lord. May your presence be present here. Protect this technology. Protect anybody who's listening, Lord. Let no malevolent spirit, let no entity come against them, Father. We just pray in your holy name that this will be your word spoken, not mine. And I encourage everybody's spirit to come front and to listen, Lord. May this bless their spirits, soul, and hearts. In your name, amen.
Amen.
So let me first preface this by saying I come at this whole situation as a believer. Because even when I was a little kid, my mom was very strict Orthodox Catholic growing up, which I left the Catholic faith at 9 years old, but that's a whole other story. We can get into that some other time. But growing up, my mom was real staunch. Jesus first, Jesus is life. And so I grew up believing that. So when I would hear stories growing up as a kid, my mom would be like, hey, because we lived in Chile for a while, she goes, hey, when you're out in the hills playing, don't go up to certain areas because that's where the duendes live or the little people.
Yeah. Give the audience a little geography here. Chile is in what part of South America? East or west? I know it's near the Andes, right?
Yeah. So Chile is on the west coast. So literally it is the west coast of South America. So
below Brazil.
Yeah. So you have the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
Then you have a little bit of landmass. Then you have the Andes, and then you have the rest of South America. So it's just like one big strip. And so this part of Chile is Limache. So anybody who wants to Google it, look it up. It's literally in between Santiago and Viña del Mar. So it's like a little province in there. Would be Quinta Región, so would be fifth region.
Cool. Yeah.
And so where we lived, or where my family still lives there, there's the foothills, and then you see the Andes right there, and then there's the foothills. Well, in the foothills, blackberries would grow wild. So like we'd go up there all the time and go pick blackberries, go kid stuff, screw around over there, and just do stupid things.
Play in the woods. That's what we did.
Yeah. And so for years, my mom and my aunts, my grandma would tell us stories like, hey, don't go up there, because if you go up there, the duendes are up there and they kidnap kids, they take kids, they eat them. And we always thought like, you're just screwing with us, you're just trying to keep us away from there, because technically we're on private property stealing blackberries and stuff. And they told us a story that one of their friends from elementary school was up in that area and he disappeared and they never saw him.
Wow.
And so like they were very adamant, like, he, and my mom was very specific. She's told, if I remember the details, she was like, yeah, he was their grade school friend and he was up there and he disappeared. And I remember I met one of his brothers at one point, and me being a stupid little kid, I'm like, hey, did your brother disappear when you were, he looked at me like, who told you this? And I was just like, oh, okay. So I didn't think anything of it. I just thought like, okay, he just disappeared, and they just blamed they made up some story, because there's some shady stuff that happens in Chile. I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. There's some SRA stuff that goes on there. I actually got to see some stuff. Growing up, I saw some rituals and stuff that happened up near the foothills.
Is there a lot of Santeria down there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So like, even if you go down there, like, it's a beautiful country to visit. Anybody listening, I suggest at one point in your life, take the time, go visit. It's a beautiful country. But you'll see everywhere there, like all up and down the roads, you'll see little shrines. It's kind of like Mexico and other South American countries. You'll see the shrines to people who died, and they make them saints, and there's like little altars to them. Yeah. Now, what's interesting is there's a story, and my mom actually took me to see this, so I've seen this with my own eyes. Up in Calera, which is by the Pan American Highway. Actually, no, I take that back. It's actually by the Quebrada Varal. So it's like on the mountain ridge, which is a pathway. There's a rock, and there's an axe pick that's buried in the rock. Well, the story goes that there was a group of miners that were working there, and the devil had shown up and actually worked with them. And to kind of cement that he was there, he buried his pickaxe in that rock, and you can see a hoof print there. And to this day, it is still there. And it's like you can see the pickaxe, and then there's a hoof print right there. And it's like in this very remote area, and you can clear as day see it. And so it's and a lot of people growing up told me that in those areas there's a lot of Satanists, and they do a lot of rituals in that area. So that's why they conjured them up. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's interesting you bring up mines. I mean, that's connected with little people all over the world, exactly. Europe, whatever. So it's funny that you just gave a mine story, and we're talking about little people here.
Well, it makes me wonder if that's where we got our dwarves from, the little people underground and all that. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah. Well, like you said, there's different races of entities. I mean, the duendes specifically are very unique and specific to what they do.
Yeah.
Well, also, I don't know if we look up the research of Timothy Alberino and Steve Quell, and when they talked about the Curicancha, which is the underground tunnels they found in Peru. Well, those go all the way to Chile. Because I remember hearing stories of my uncles and stuff that they would play around in these huge caverns that look like hallways, like gigantic hallways, while they were down in Santiago, San Lorenzo area. And I remember my uncle telling me stories like growing up, there were these huge caverns that would lead to these big caverns, and they just felt they shouldn't be there. They just felt this evil, and they would smell sulfur. And so now and I get to that point because I remember growing up, my parents told me, and my uncles would tell me, if you smell sulfur, there's a demon around or there's something evil around. So you smell sulfur, you book it. You just get out of there. And so leading up to my first encounter with one of these guys, me and my cousin, we were little, we were like 6 or 7 around there. And we're up doing what we ain't supposed to be doing up there, grabbing blackberries and stuff. And you ever feel like something comes into the room and you just feel like a presence? And so I felt that. I'm like, what's going on? And then I smell it. I could smell sulfur. And I'm just like, wait a minute. I know that smell. Like, I'm like, and then my cousin's kind of like, he has this look of like, what the, what is, I'm like, what? And I look over and it's this blue little thing. The best way I could ever describe it is the little dude from Cat's Eyes, the little goblin looking thing. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. So imagine that looking thing, the little weird looking hat bobbit thing, but it has the face of a critter, like the 80s movie Critters. That big old,
I saw that movie. Yeah.
So it has that face.
So he was blue. He was blue skinned.
Yeah,
blue.
Blue.
Interesting.
Straight up blue. Like he was like just head to toe, just blue. But you could see, but you could make out his features. So like he was like, and that's why I say the thing from Cat's Eyes is the only thing I can describe, because you could see it was like a little outfit, but it was just blue, just like head to toe blue.
How tall? I mean, I know you were a kid, so it's gonna be hard to figure. How tall was he, you think?
Probably at least 2 feet.
Oh, real small.
Yeah, it's probably like a good 15, 20 feet away. So like I could definitely tell the size, but the presence of it was like it wanted to kill us. Like we knew for sure we're not welcomed here. So we booked it. I mean, we just tore out of there, run to the house, and we tell my aunts and my mom, and they're not even surprised. They're like, we told you don't go up there. We told you they live up there. What do you expect? We've been telling you for years, don't go up there. And something I didn't get to say on the Blurry podcast, but afterwards, my grandmother came up to me, and she was, before my family got saved, before my mom and everybody got really saved as Christians rather than Catholics, they would do the Santeria type of prayer, prayer with the egg, prayer, all that. So my grandma did that prayer over me. I remember she's like, yeah, you got the stench on you. They know who you are now, so they'll come and they'll try to take you in the middle of the night. And she was really hardcore about that.
So she thought there was almost, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No,
almost kind of a marking thing there, like with the scent.
Yeah, and which I think there's some validity to that, because it was after that I started having dreams about grays and seeing and waking up to, like, as a kid, even all the way up until my mid-20s, before I actually got really, really saved, that I would wake up and I'd have entities looking down, like the grays looking down on me.
Now, when you say grays, you mean like the gray aliens, right? I'm trying to clarify that for all.
Yeah.
Classic gray aliens.
Okay. Yeah. And so it was literally after that experience, and then after some other stuff that I won't get into, that as a kid I experienced while being there, that I started seeing that type of stuff. And I tell my parents all the time, like, hey, I don't want to sleep in my room because I see this at night. And they never believe me. They're like, like, you're just watching too many sci-fi movies or scary movies. But I remember very vividly the shadow beings being in the room.
Right. Exactly.
And I'd see them in the hall, up in the ceiling. The scariest things that would happen, though, was when you're just laying there and somebody would sit on the bed and there's nobody there.
Wow.
And so I remember that growing up, and I would tell my parents, and they never believed me. And but then one day, my older brother, he had to sleep there because he had to sleep in the room, because I forgot why he had to. Oh, I think he got drunk and he had to sleep it off there, and I had to hide him from my parents. I'm in the other room, and he comes out and he goes, "I'm never sleeping in your room again." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Dude, there's stuff going in there." I'm like, "Yeah, I've been telling everybody for years and nobody believes me."
Yeah.
And like, he's like, "Oh," and he never stepped in there again, like never, ever. And but that was kind of the stuff growing up, man. It was just, I would tell people, and it wasn't until like high school that I met some of my friends who were like, "Yeah, I see stuff like that too," or like, "Yeah,
it's
you
all over."
Well, let me ask you this, Nick. As you grew up and you experienced these things, did you experience like a lot of like trauma from people not believing you and
oh
thinking
yeah,
you're nuts and stuff like that? I mean, did that put a big like an imprint in your soul when people would, you know, the reason I asked this is I heard a story. I listen to Let's Read, and it's mostly Reddit stories.
mhm,
But anyway, this guy the other night was talking about how he hid his paranormal story his whole life because he was so afraid of what people would think. And I think a lot of people out there don't realize the trauma. I mean, we love to hear the stories, but we don't realize the trauma or the fear or the stuff that comes with this, especially with kids, but older.
yeah. I
Yeah.
had it growing up. I had a huge inferiority complex, as you can say.
Right.
So I'd always like, I never, because after a while, like, it got to the point that I could never share this with people. I remember being in high school, and a friend of mine invited me to a youth group, and I'm like, okay. And I love God, I love Jesus, but I was a teenager. I was doing my own thing. And so when my friend told me like, "Hey, come check out this youth group," and I went and I got baptized there because I was like, "Oh, right up my alley." But when I started sharing my stories of what's been going on and what I see, all I'd hear is like, "Oh, that's satanic stuff. You need to burn all your Metallica CDs. You need to burn all
Don't
your
get me going there.
yeah." Like,
Right.
and I'm a guitarist, to this day, I still, still play. And they're like, "You just got to stop playing all that music." And I'm trying to tell you what's going on with me. Like, I seriously see things at night. And and I can tell you the saving grace that I had was throughout the whole ordeal. It was literally a battle between Jesus and them, because I would
Mhm.
hear the Holy Spirit saying, "Hey," like, I'd go to the heavy metal clubs, and I grew up in Dallas. So I don't know if,
Yeah.
okay, so I grew up in going to Deep Ellum. That's where was my bread and butter, man. I was there all the time. And I remember I'd go into these clubs and I'd hear Jesus telling me, "Hey, hey, go home. Don't be here." And I can never stick around for a full show. Like, I'd see the band I wanted to see and I'd leave because I'd feel this conviction. But
Yeah.
then I'd be at home and I'd be dealing with these mental wars. I kid you not. You're gonna be the first people I've ever admitted this to, because I feel people need to hear this. Um, Growing up, and I would try to go to sleep, I'd hear these voices saying like, sell your
Right.
soul," and you'd hear it. And it's like you just be grabbing your ears and just like screaming. And my parents would come in, just stop drinking or stop. You're on drugs again. I was just like, it's not that. And it really wasn't until I was about 23 when I got actually saved.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and funny story. So, at that time, I was playing with the band, and I don't know if any of y'all know Dallas back in the early 2000s. They had a Christian club called The Door. Um, and so at this point, I was kind of rebellious, and I was like, and my band was actually opening up for Blindside. We're actually opening.
Remember that.
We're the opening act for it. And I'm like, man. And I wasn't mad at God, but I was mad at Christianity at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna play at this show. I'm gonna be drunk, and I'm gonna be all jacked up. And I was so drunk when I played this show, I fell off the stage. And I was like high. I mean, I had done so, I was high. Well, after the show, I remember this like fear came over me. And I don't experience fear too much because of all the crap that I've seen. I was like, nothing really shakes me that much. But I felt this guttural fear, like something's gonna get me.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, okay, maybe I did a little bit too much. And I'm like freaking out. But I ended up calling my dad to come get me. I'm like, hey, I think I'm ODing or something. Take me home. And my dad's like, you need to go to church. We're taking you to church. And so that next morning, they took me to church where I got saved at.
Mm-hmm.
And the pastor, what he's talking about is just like, bam, right between the eyes. Every single thing is just like, got saved right there and then. And it was like one of those like, oh, it was like, Saul getting kicked off the horse type of salvations, It's like, it's like wow. And I remember that night I slept and I didn't hear them. I didn't hear the voices. Mm-hmm. Nothing was in the room. And I was like, whoa, this is nice. And so that kind of led me down. I was like, there's something here. It's like, okay, so what is this? What was causing all this? And then I met this one dude at the same church. And I never talked about any of this with anybody. Even after I got saved, I wasn't really talking about it. But his name was Greg in a Bible study. And he's talking about giants. And he's talking about duendes. He's talking about these little creatures. He's talking about alien grays, how they're demons coming up. And I'm just like, whoa, okay. And he looked at me. He goes, "You've seen them." And I was like,
"Yeah." Let me ask you this. I'm sorry. I'm just questions are going through my head while you're saying things. Have you discovered with amongst people that it's easier for them to believe in like Sasquatches and aliens than the little people?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
But
I figured that
because they're less creepy.
But here's the thing.
Maybe.
Well, here's the thing. They're all related and they all travel in the same circle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll get to that here in a second. Because it's like all this kind of leads up to where I'm at now in my research with them. And so, so he was talking about all this and I kind of started sharing some things and he goes, "Oh man, you're a seer. You see these things." I'm like, "Yeah, I've seen them my whole life." And we had coffee that day and he was telling me about the stuff he would see. He saw, and I'm like, "Are you in my brain? Because this is the exact same things that I see." And he's like, "No, man." He goes, "It's just, it's facts. This is biblical." And that and he was telling me about the angels that came down and had sex with women and created all these beings. But what a lot of people don't tend to realize is they also had sex with animals and created these animal hybrids, these offshoots.
Chimeras,
And so what a lot of people don't realize is Bigfoot, or quote unquote Sasquatch, is technically one of those because he has the same characteristics as every other mystical creature. They can disappear. They have supernatural strength. They're big in size. They have this either they have a real evil presence about them or they have a malevolent presence about them. So, all these people wonder like, oh, what is Bigfoot? It's an animal. It's like, it's a hybrid. It's one of the descendants of the Nephilim because if somebody, just logically thinking, if somebody told you, hey, in about 100-something years, we're going to flood this whole earth. God's going to just ravage everybody. Don't you think you'd come up? Somebody would have a logical plan and be like, okay, maybe we should have a backup plan and go underground, which is where you have these tunnels. And that's why where the Bible says the giants were in those days. And then the days after, it's like, where'd they come from? Okay, logically, you would think they would hide or they would prepare for that.
Well, it seems like to me though that the Nephilim, albeit a different way, were doing the same type of experiments the Nazis were doing during World War II. It's like you wonder where the Nazis got it from. They got it from the Nephilim and from sinister forces to do all these weird experiments. And
technology aimed at harming humans is
technology and creating them out of God's image. I think that's what the devil's after. He doesn't want us to be in God's image anymore. He wants us to be malformed.
Yep. And that's like, just to kind of fast forward to stories and to where I'm at right now, after I got saved and I discovered I'm not the only person going through this, he introduced me to Chuck Missler This was like in 2006, 2007 when I got introduced to them. Chris Putnam, I started really diving into a lot of his podcasts back in the day. And so that kind of led me down this rabbit hole. And so I started researching Bigfoot, started researching all these, La Llorona, all these malevolent beings. And I'm wondering to myself, because growing up, we'd always hear La Lechuza. You see a Lechuza, you run, which is an owl. And then I started reading Native American stories of the owl, how they go hand in hand with South American stories, Chilean stories, Mexican stories. And I'm like, man, all this is connected.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started researching the little people, the duendes. And I started really, really getting into it. And I started reading all these stories of gnomes and leprechauns and all this stuff. And at the time, I was living in Texas. And so where I lived in Texas, I was living in Dallas. We didn't encounter that type of stuff because it's so populated. They're not in the populated area. So I never really thought I'd ever really encounter this type of stuff ever again. Well, lo and behold, 8 years ago, my job at the time moved us to Wisconsin. And where we moved to Wisconsin, it's like right in the middle of a Native American, where a Native American camp was before, the Potawatomi had it before they came back in the, I think it was like late 1800s and bought it from them. And kind of tying the story, I'm trying to condense it because it's like everything's like it can go so long.
Hey, just go.
Well, up to that point, God had really been showing me some supernatural things in my life. So one story, for it, I don't know if you got to hear about my daughter literally seeing Jesus Christ. And for those who hadn't heard, I'll condense it. I'll share some of it. So, well, let me backtrack it because it's like there's so much. It's like So, my family's been targeted. My whole life, I know now that I've been a targeted person, either by dark forces or something's been trying to take me out because I have so many near-death experiences that it's like not even funny. One notable time was when me and my wife, she was pregnant with my boys. I have twin boys. She was pregnant, and we're going to go have dinner. And if you know Dallas, it's by the Hunkies. It's by the Bishop Arts District. So anybody who knows the area will know exactly what I'm talking about. So we're walking and we're about to cross the street. I look over to my right, look over to the left, no cars, none of that whatsoever. So we cross. As soon as my foot hits the floor, a car comes out of nowhere. I mean, like nowhere, just hauling butt, and I look over and I'm about to push my wife out the way. And I literally, in my spirit, I see a flash and I see this car just shoved into the pole, like the light pole. So
Wow.
it's like I just see it and I look into the car. There's nobody in the car. There's just two shadows in the car. And this car, it was like this. It was like bent. So like it was clearly damaged, hit the pole. And me and my wife were like, what? And in the clearest day, I looked back and I see it when I saw that flash, I saw it was an angel, orangish hair, blue armor, and I just saw him just flung it. But it was in my spirit. It wasn't like physical eyes. It was like my spirit eyes saw this like in a flash. And so we're like, what is going on? And so we went inside to go eat or like kind of calm down. And we were in there probably like 20 minutes or so. So this car should have still been there because it was clearly just like wrecked. The only thing that you could see was just a skid mark, but that's about it. Like that pole was in perfect condition. There was no car. There was nothing.
Oh, wow.
And my wife even was, you saw that, right? I'm like, yeah, I saw it. I was right there. I was about to push you out the way. And to this day, nobody believes me. So fast forward, the boys are born. there was this one nurse, dark hair, brown eyes, dark skin. She kind of looked Filipino, but was Latin at the same time. She kind of looked Native American. So every time because they were in the NICU for about a week and a half, because there were 32 weeks, there were preemies. Every time I'd go to the NICU, she'd be holding one of them, and she'd just smile, and she'd never said a word. Never said a word. She was just always smiling, and she would give me the baby, and then she'd go off and do her own thing, and never thought anything of it. But she was like, she just had this present smile. So when we're about to take them home, I go down there. I had a gift. I was like, hey, I'm gonna bring her a gift because she was the nicest nurse ever. And I asked everybody, like, hey, where's I don't even know her name. What's her what? And I describe her. They're like, there's no nurse that fits that description. I'm like, what do you? I literally would see her every day with the kids. Like she'd always be holding one of them. She'd always be, and they're like, no. And I'd ask my wife. She goes, I never saw a nurse like that. I'm like,
wow.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
Dude.
And I'm like, and to this day, if I saw her, I would be, that's her.
Yeah.
But she had this smile about her. Like was just like, she was like the nicest. Like she had to be an angel, of course. Now that I look back. So then with my daughter, one day we're watching the movie Heaven is Real. Mm-hmm. And it's at the part where the girl from Lithuania, she's drawing pictures of Jesus. And my daughter's about 6 years old at the time. She walks in, she has a lollipop in her mouth, and she walks in and looks at the TV, and she flings the lollipop out and just runs to the TV and hugs the TV. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, that's my friend. That's Jesus. I'm like, I know it's a picture of Jesus. She goes, no, that's how he looks. That's him. I'm like, what do you mean that's him? She goes, that's him. That's how he looks. I see him all the time at the Purple Castle. I'm like, what Purple Castle? She's like, every time I go to sleep, Jesus comes in my dreams and takes me, and we're off and we're playing with the other kids. I'm like, what other kids? And she's like,
we'll let him catch up. It's okay.
Yeah.
Nobody knows this. And because we never talked about it with anybody ever, because my niece had passed away 10 years prior, and we never had mentioned it out of respect. And
Nico,
so, yeah,
you're gonna have to talk about that story, because you cut out just as you were talking about your kiddo seeing the other
Purple
one
Castle
in the Purple Castle.
Yeah, this happens all the time.
I know. I understand.
Every time I talk about this story,
it's because the powers of the air, man.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So my daughter was talking about seeing Jesus in the Purple Castle. Now, whoever's listening to this, I'm going to say this, and I say this. I can't say it without wanting to cry.
Yeah.
Because it's not me saying these words. Jesus holds anybody who's lost a baby, you've lost a daughter, you've lost a son, you miscarriage, you've had an abortion before knowing what it really does. Jesus has your baby.
Yeah.
And they're growing up.
Yeah, definitely.
They are growing up just like they would grow up here. They're in paradise. They're at peace.
They're in the Purple Castle.
Yeah. And the way I can say this without a shadow of a doubt, and this is actually strengthens my faith every day, that I know there's an afterlife. So when my daughter had told us that, she sees Jesus there, then she says, I talk to Ella all the time. And we're like, who? She's like, Ella, my cousin who went with Jesus. I'm like, how do you know this? Because nobody knows this. We don't talk about this. nobody knows this story other than me and your mom. And she's like, well, I talk to her all the time. She goes, she looks like Natalie. I'm like, how do you know this? And that shocked me because when Ella was born, she was stillborn. She was stillborn. So I got to hold her. And what I noticed about her is she looked like my other niece, Natalie, looked like identical. And when she said that, I was like, there's no way she knows this. So later on in the day, we had just one picture of her funeral, and nobody's seen this picture. It's locked away. There's no way anybody could ever see this picture. So I pull this picture out, and I call my daughter over. I'm like, Abby, hey, who's this? And I show her the picture. She starts laughing. She goes, oh, that's Ella as a baby. And she was in her burial dress. She goes, she has a prettier dress now. Hers is like super shiny and it's like sparkly and it has like gold. And I was just like, what? And she told me stories like this all the time growing up. She even told me some apocalyptic stuff about about demons walking the earth and her brothers having flaming swords, or she called them, they were flaming knives, and they were like chopping down these demons. And I'm just like, huh. And God showed me that that's the word of God that's going to be in them. And the end times, they'll be preaching the word, and the demons are what's coming down. And I'm just like, oh, wow. And all this just super, and just there's other stories, like even me getting my transplant is full of miracles and stuff. But that's a whole other story that I don't want to detract from the topic at hand, the little guys.
Well, let me ask you this. I would like to hear that story if we have time at the end. But before we go there, if it's all right with you, I'd like to hear about the different types of little people that you've done research on and the different races, so to speak. I guess they're races or I don't know what ethnicities or whatever.
They'd be races. Yeah, there's
it'd be races. Okay.
Yeah, it'd be more races and actually more like species to be
species.
blunt.
Okay, yeah, that's the better word.
Is a good one.
Yeah.
So let me pull up here. I got like notes and notes. So the way I got involved with them was about 7 years ago. No, well, 8 years ago when we moved. Like I said, when we moved here to Wisconsin, we moved into an area where it used to be a native land, and there's a nature preserve right behind my house.
Yeah, some of those nature preserves aren't actually really designed for deer and pigeons. Therefore,
I don't think
the entities.
I don't think so at all. I think that like a lot of the missing 411 stuff.
Yeah,
I wonder if it's not necessarily aliens only. I wonder if some of it's these little people or other things as well.
People wander into areas that are supposed to be cordoned off for these things.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and I think into all that, I will say yes. And here's why I will agree with that. So what a lot of people don't realize about Wisconsin, it is a very charged area. The Smithsonian took a lot of stuff from here. They kind of hide a lot of information, but they found numerous giant skeletons here. Right. There are numerous mounds here that a lot of people don't realize. Like where I live right by Lake Michigan. I'll just say it's the Ozaukee County area. Where I live, there is a huge Catholic church, and there is a Masonic temple within blocks of each other. Coincidence? I don't think so. But that's another conversation. Where we were living at the time, because we moved into this area, I'd go in the backyard all the time, and the nature preserve is right back there. Well, I'd go back there, and I'd feel like I'm being watched. And I'm like, huh. And it was the same presence I remember feeling as a kid in Chile. but it wasn't the evil dark presence. It was just that presence that was just there. And I'd hear this little, every now and then I'd hear little like clicks, stick clicks. And I was like, what is that noise? And I'd yell at the kids. I'm like, hey, stop screwing around. I'm like, they're not us. It's not us. We're not even in the woods. It's like, huh, okay. And I'd be back there barbecuing and or whatnot. And then I'd like to go walking back there into the preserve, and I'd hear little kids giggle. I'd hear like laughter, but I never really thought anything about it because there's a school not too far from there, and then there's a public park like on the other side of it. So I was kind of always figured like, oh, it's kids and everything. But I'd hear this like at 2, 3 in the morning when I'd go out for like an evening walk because to see the stars out there is like perfect view to go see them at that time. But I'd hear these little giggles. I'm just like, what is that? So I started remembering the stories my parents would tell me, and I was like, well, let me look this up. And then I started reading here in this area. I can't even pronounce the name too well. It's like they have the Mangishi, the Joga, the Chinekwe, Ganala, Alux, all these names for them. But the one that's here is known as the Wakaka. That's what the tribes here would call them. And the Navajo also call them the Wakaka as well. And wow, I was like, there's no way I could have these little people in my backyard. There's no way. From what I read, they live in mountains. They live where there's caverns. So I'm like, no way. So I left it alone for a bit, but then I got sick. Came down to kidney failure. And then I remember being in the hospital sitting for a month and a half, and I'm bored out of my mind. So I just started researching all this stuff up. So I get back to the house and I'm out of the hospital. And I remember thinking, I don't know why I had this thought. I'm like, if I'm really sick, I can't protect the kids as well from these entities. I should go back there and I should make peace with these little guys. So a lot of the folklore that I read was if you take them hard candy, whiskey, and tobacco, you kind of appease them, because other stories go in other countries and other areas, people would put candy in their kids' pockets, so they would take the candy or the treats from them, so they'd leave the kids alone. So I'm like, okay, if I do this, maybe they'll leave my kids alone. I don't know why I had the belief that they were real. I don't know why. Like I was sure they're back there. I got to do this. Like my wife thought I was crazy. She still thinks I'm crazy. To this day, she still thinks I'm crazy about this. And so I went out and bought a bag of candy, big one from Walmart. Had some little whiskey bottles and got some tobacco. And I went back there, and it was a big oak tree, huge one. You can't miss it. I left it there. I'm like, hey, little guys, I'm just saying, I'm cool with y'all. I got no beef with you. I know you're back here. This is your turf. I just asked that, don't mess with my kids. We respect your property. If they're back here playing, I'll make sure they clean up. And I was like, so I took a few steps, and somebody said go back to look. And so I took a few steps away. Then I come back to that tree, which I know it's the tree because you can't miss it. It's gone.
Wow.
Like, the candy's gone, tobacco's gone, whiskey's gone. And I'm just like, what? And I'm like, okay. But then I felt the presence there changed. It wasn't no longer a heavy presence. It was more like you walk into a place and you're familiar. It's like, oh, you feel like you belong there.
Yeah.
That's how it felt, like right away.
Yeah, see, I don't think a lot of people understand that. You're going to get listeners going, oh, well, those are demons you're dealing with. They're demons, right? It's like, well, this doesn't follow because cultures around the world will appease an entity with giving them milk. The idea of giving Santa Claus, for example, milk and cookies and carrots for his reindeer is actually born from this myth of giving the elves milk and biscuits. So there's a lot of truth to the fact that these are actual entities that work off of basically psionic, the psychic works. They
Yeah.
do mind speak. They do various things that are kind of in a different
Telepathic.
yeah,
Interesting you say that.
evolution than we are.
So yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. So that night, because I was doing dialysis at home at the time, I hook up to my machine and go to bed, and I'm woken up in the middle of the night, and I look out and I see three. There's three of those little dudes sitting right there on the side of my bed, and the room's dark, so I can't really make out too much of their features, but I can see their shape, their figures. And but what I can make out is they're wearing these little coats, like that look like little.
Yep. Yes.
Trying to figure out, it's like it'll be like kind of like a little. I don't want to say fleece, but they look like little.
They're made out of animal skins. It's really
Ki-
weird. They do
Kind of
that.
like
They harvest their own furs.
yeah. And so, and then they're wearing the little hats, and the closest thing would be like little gnomish hats, but they're not as prevalent. And I wake up and I said it out loud. I'm like, oh my God, you're real. Like, I'm like, you're real. And they're there in my, so here's where it gets interesting. So in my brain, I started thinking Jesus Christ. I just started thinking the name Jesus. And they disappeared. They just like were good. And so what was interesting is I started researching a lot after this. I started researching even more, and that's what they're notorious for. Is they'll show up and they just kind of like vanish. It's like it was just like a kind of. Well, a week or so later, I see my daughter. She has a little basket and she's putting apples in it, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Oh, I'm taking this to my friends." I'm like, "Oh, who are you playing with?" She goes, "Oh, the little guys in the back." I'm like, "What little guys in the back?"
That's so funny. I was just about to ask you if any of your kids had any interactions with them. Yep. Wow.
And she goes, "Yeah, it's the little guys. They came to see you the other day, but you got scared, and so they disappeared because they didn't want to scare you anymore." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Yeah." She goes, "Yeah, they came to visit you at night, and they know you're sick, so they came to see you, but you got scared, and so they got scared." I was just like, "Okay." And so I see, so I see her going in the back, and she has her friend Emma's coming with her too. She has a basket, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Oh, I'm gonna go see my friends. They let us play in the secret place now." I'm like, "What secret place?" She goes, "Come." So I go with them, and they put the little baskets down, and they go off to play. And I've been back there already for about a year now. So it's like it's not that big of a preserve, but it's a good size. And I've been all over it. I walk all over it. They go to this one area that I have never seen. I have never seen this place. Some trees, and there's like a tree that's made into like a swing. And I'm like, how is this place here? She goes, "Oh, the little guys, they showed it to us. It's like this our secret place." They're like, "Don't tell anybody." I'm like, okay. And it's weird because I go back there to visit every once in a while, and I can't find it. It's not. I can't find it. And
Yeah.
but yeah, it's so. But it's like this tree that's made into a swing, and so going back to they show us the kids show me that, and I'll go back to where the apples were, and they're gone, like they're just gone. And my daughter describes them, and because she says she's seen them a few times. She's at school right now, but I'm pretty sure she'll come on and talk to you about it. But she describes them as they're dark skinned. They have little coats. She says their outfits are amazing. She goes, that's the way she goes, "Dad, your outfits are so awesome. They're like little coats, they're little boots." I'm like, "Well, how do they look? Their facial wise?" She goes, "I can't really ever see their face, but I just know they're brown skinned." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting." And then she's like, "But they talk to me in my brain." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "They don't talk. They just, I think what they say, and that's them telling me." I was like, "So you mean tell me they like talk to your mind?" She's like, "Yeah, they talk in my mind." And they're like, "But they're not evil. They're real sweet guys." And I was like, okay. So this went on for the whole course that we were living there. We were living there for about 5 years and never had a problem. The only incident we had was my neighbor's kid would always talk trash about them. They ran into them too. They tell them, "Hey, don't tease them because you're gonna
They'll
piss
throw
them off."
rocks. They'll throw rocks at you.
Yeah.
So one day I see him. He's out there. I'm like, "Hey, what's wrong?" He goes, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it." I'm like, "Why aren't you playing with the kids in the woods?" He's like, "I don't want to go back there." I'm like, "What'd you do?" He goes, "I don't want to talk about it." I'm like, and to this day, like he's 15 now because they're about like they're little, I think like 8, 9 years old at the time, but he's 15 now. He won't talk about it. I'm like, "Dude, tell me what happened." He goes, "I don't want to talk about it." I'm like, so they put a scare into him. Like
Yeah.
and but so these guys here, they have to be the Kanatolia one, which is the Lakota name for them, because they fit the descriptions. Now the other ones that we ran into was actually here at my new house. My daughter saw them first, and I've seen them every once in a while. They're the ones that dress in white, and
Wow.
so
Well,
what's
hey, can I ask you a question? Well, I'm thinking about I have Biden brain. Oops, sorry, should I say that? I have
Edit that out, Sandy.
Edit that out. Say it's my wife. No, do you think that the different little people are somehow connected to different ethnicities? Like, you have in Ireland, you have the leprechauns, and then over
Yep.
here in Native Americans, and they look more Native American, and then maybe in
Yeah.
Germany they look like this, and in South America they look like this. Do you think that's how they appear, or that's how they are in the culture they're around?
Yeah,
Think there's
for
a
sure.
connection? Yeah, yeah.
Because
Okay.
because in my research, I've gone up to Door County in Wisconsin, which is about 2 hours north of me, and which is a
Yeah.
very big Norwegian, a big Icelandic nationality, and I see they have little gnomes everywhere. And so I started kind of asking around, started asking some of the old timers up there. I'm like, "Hey, what's up with all the gnomes here?" And we started out like, "Oh, they live here." I'm like,
Yeah.
"What?" Like, I'm like, "What?
Some of
The
them are
little
not
guys?"
statues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the creepy part.
Do the statues keep the gnomes away? Is that why we've started doing that? Like
In some
people,
places, they're kind of designed the way
Yeah.
you'd put like coyotes, fake coyotes in your
Yeah.
field, or
Gargoyle.
birds
Or
near your
or
water
an owl.
place.
You put an owl up near your garden a
There's
lot of
all
times.
sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And I know up in Washington Island. So if you ever come to Wisconsin and go to Washington Island, there's I think it was a Norwegian church that's built there. It's made out of wood. It's like 100-something-year-old church.
Yeah.
I think I've seen pictures of that.
They told me there's villages of what they call gnomes. They call them gnomes up there. That are the Norwegian ones that live up there. And so it's just crazy. But to hear my new house here by the lake here in Port, we ran into the ones that dress in white. Now, what's interesting about those are the ones that are in the Cherokee stories. Those are the ones that are the ones. I think. Hold on. I think I got this written down here somewhere. Those would be the Yunwe Sunzi. I'm probably pronouncing it horribly wrong, but those are the ones that the story goes when Jesus was born. They called the shaman of the Cherokee people, and they got all the people together, and they told them the holy man, the world's most holiest man, was born.
Right.
And then after he died, they called everybody, and they were crying, and they told everybody that the most holiest man ever to walk the earth had passed away. And when he was crying, when they were crying, their tears turned into the cross stones of North Carolina. And to this day, you can find those stones there that are shaped of a cross, and they call them the fairy stones.
Right.
Well, we moved into this new house, and I remember my daughter's she's in the room, and she's like, "Hey, don't touch that. Hey, don't mess with that. You're gonna break." And I heard something fall, and I go in the room, and I just caught just like the tail end of them, just kind of. And she's like, "Yeah, it's one of the little guys. They're curious about my stuff." I'm like, oh, okay. She's like, yeah, they're not mean or anything. They're just curious. I'm like, okay. And so to this day, like every now and then I'll catch them here and they're not evil or anything. They're just there. They're just like, now what's interesting, the other day, I was telling a friend of mine, and I think she saw one too. I was outside, and I was going by my car, and I saw a little fairy, a little guy, little dinky fairy, floating around my car, and I'm just like, what the heck? And then later on that night, I go out to my son's car to move it, and it just kind of it's right in front of me. It's clear as day, little fairy. It was just a little white orb type of thing, but you can see the little wings flapping, and it just stared at me for like a good minute, and then it just took off. And I was like, what? I was like, what is going on? And I was like, why is there a fairy? And so, I've come to find out that my friends had a wedding this past week, and we're at the location by the lake, and there's sure enough, there's a fairy tree right there. I'm like, oh, that's where it came from. And so if you ever want to know what a fairy tree looks like, they usually look like little cabinish looking trees, and you'll feel it. Like you get near and you'll feel like there's somebody there. But depending on folklore, depending on how your spirit is, they'll either welcome you or not. But I tell everybody, if you're going to dabble into, not dabble, but if you're going to really dive into this, be in prayer, like pray up, because a lot of these entities are not good. And people, and I need to clarify that. So now to tie all this to what I said, how they're connected to the giants and connected to all these other entities. Well, where that nature preserve was, there's a mound, and and anywhere you find mounds, 99% of the time, I will guarantee you, there's a giant skeleton down there.
There's Sasquatch. There's alien. I mean, down here in Mississippi, this is really interesting, Nico. We have we interviewed a guest, and we had a tornado come right by a place called Rolling Fork, which Biden came down to visit and called it the Rolling Stone. But anyway, that's a side story. But anyway, but the tornadoes jumped the mounds and stuff. Didn't they jump them, Lindsay? Yeah, the tornado went around the mound.
I just remember him saying that there was some
bizarre
tornadoes in the
bizarre.
Mountains. Well, I mean, you raised an interesting question to me about some of our assumptions here. Like, we want to think about what's on the bad side all the time, but we don't think about the different things that could be on the good side, so to speak, God's side, unfallen entities that don't fall under the typical what we would call angelic beings, that's our catch-all term for everything. And raise some interesting questions. Could there be good? I mean, I thought about Zechariah. I think it's in Zechariah where you got the evil woman on that little basket. You put the lid on it, and these winged female creatures come up and take
sounds like a harpy to me
to the north. And harpies. So that tells us there could be some things these seem to be entities that were working for the Lord, and I don't know.
We're forced to work for the Lord. That happens too.
Yeah. Well, and that ties in too with what I've heard about Sasquatch and Bigfoot. You have malevolent ones, and then you have benevolent ones. And so, it really gets us outside our paradigm that everything's demonic. A demon in the gaps, everything's demonic. And I'm just so tired of Christians not thinking outside the box enough to realize that not everything is demonic.
Well, see, and I'll tell you an interesting thing. If you want to really do some research, I'm going to probably send people on a quest here. Holy Hill, Wisconsin.
Holy Hill, Wisconsin.
Holy Hill, Wisconsin is one of the most charged areas you will ever visit. And I've been there personally because researching this, like I said, I've discovered that wherever you see a mounds, you're going to see the little people activity. You're going to also see Sasquatch. And also here in Wisconsin, we have what's called Goat Man, Dog Man. I think the beast from Bray Road. Yeah.
Bray Road. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember this. I remember the Dog Man. Well, I went out to Holy Hill not too long ago because I went to research some of these stories.
Yeah.
Well, Holy Hill is a big Catholic church, massive. It's a basilica. You go into the sanctuary, you'll see on the walls all these like wheelchairs, amputated like leg crutches, all this stuff from people who have been miraculously healed there. You walk in there, it's a portal. You walk if you're sensitive to any of this type of stuff, you will know for sure there is a portal here. And ironically, being the Catholic Church, no offense to Catholics, I'm just saying what my research has shown me. They build their churches on top on high places, on spiritually charged areas. That's why every place in the world that has a Catholic basilica or Catholic chapel, it's over a charged area. I'm not the one saying this. I'm just the one that's just relaying the information because do your research yourself. Prove me
Well,
wrong.
you look where Jesus went to cast war on the Nephilim, and he did it at the top of Mount Hermon. It's pretty much the tradition to establish Jesus stuff over the sites of evil.
So when I was there, I started going around. So it's a beautiful area. It's beautiful. So I started going around this area. So they have the Stations of the Cross, but where they are, it's on these hills, like these hills. Well, I started going down there to go take a look, and my spirit's like, nope, don't go down there, nope. Yeah, and so you ever feel like you're in a place you do not need to belong, and you feel like a pressure on your chest, and something's telling you like, no, don't go down there, no, just evil, don't go down there.
Yeah,
and I'm feeling this, and I'm just like 2 stations in, and they go down for a good while, and I'm like, what's going on? And I hear my spirit screaming at me, these are not hills, they're mounds.
Wow.
And I'm looking at it. And I'm looking at them. And so the Stations of the Cross, they got the statues. Well, the rocks look like skulls. They look like straight up skulls. And I'm just like, whoa. Well, I couldn't make it too far in because I just something wouldn't let me. While I'm walking out, I see this family walking down the steps and they're with their kids. And I hear one of the kids say, oh, look, that's where we saw that light after Grandpa died right there. And he's like, yeah, it was right there. And I was like, I got curious and I'm like, what? I overheard your story. Can you tell me what you're talking about? Yeah, when my grandpa died, we came down here to pray and we saw a light right there. And they showed and they were pointing at it. And sure enough, a little orb shows up right there. As soon as they said that, they're like, yeah, that's the light right there. I'm just like, whoa.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got out of there, and I felt like I was being watched. That's what it felt like, and it felt like Chile watched. Like, okay, I don't belong here. I should not be here right now.
Yeah.
And so, but that whole area there, you'll hear stories like just look it up, man. There's like thousands of stories. Even the way they found that church is like mystical. The guy, I think it was like a Catholic priest was like, he got lost in the woods and he felt like the Holy Spirit was leading him there, and he got there and he saw these miraculous healings happen. And I'll give you another thing to look for if you're in the charged area. If you ever have high radon in the area, like you have a basement and has a high radon, check the history of the land. It's probably a Native American either burial ground or there's a mound that got plowed over. Because every place that I've discovered that has high radon has been a spiritually charged area.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. That's so cool. Well, we're gonna land this plane, if you don't mind, Nick, and we appreciate you so much, man, for coming on our show, man.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I enjoyed learning more about Little People. It was better than the other Little People episode. I just like how you brought all the different types out. I never realized. I knew there were different peoples that saw different little people, but I didn't know they looked so different. There were so many different races or species of these little people. That's fascinating to me. Guys, do y'all have any more questions or anything?
I was just gonna say real quick. I had to ask this before we go, and I hope it doesn't keep us too much longer. But all right, when we were doing our little people episode, man, over a year ago, maybe it was a long time ago. I came across this entity, a Chilean entity called the Trauco.
Yeah, he's the one that likes to pop out and harass women.
Yeah, down in the islands. Well, yeah, and some people say he's maybe made up to explain children born out of wedlock and things like that.
He's real. I remember a friend of mine, actually a friend of my mom's, told us a story. And she's like, "Oh yeah, the Truco is over there down by Easter Island area, down there by Chilean type of area." Yeah, and so what it is, he's for all intents and purposes, I guess you'd call him an imp, the imp type. He dresses all nice. He looks like a real handsome dude, and then he'll get a girl to take him home, and then all of a sudden he just reveals himself as to be this ugly looking dwarf thing. And that's a real story.
Yeah, some stories they wait until the entity waits until they're copulating to reveal itself. There's stories about this. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, that
is scary.
There is multiple stories about that, I totally agree that I believe it's 100% real.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's great.
I had to ask.
Well, look, we appreciate it, Nick, so much for being on our show, and thank you. It's been great, man. It's been really wonderful.
Problem. I mean, anybody has any questions? I'm pretty easy to reach.
Go ahead, give us your deets, and we'll put them in the show notes too. But give us your deets.
Look up Battling the Beast podcast on Facebook.
I'm a member of it. Yep.
And then also Battling the Beast, the group. I'm the moderator. We share some stuff there that normally would get other people banned in Facebook, but we share information. It's all godly information. I vet everything that goes on there, so I'll make sure everything is Bible based. But also we also talk about stuff that most churches don't want to talk, like having to pray artificial intelligence out of somebody, having to pray technology out of somebody for deliverance. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for coming on the show. It's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks so much, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks for listening and supporting us. And remember, stay naturally supernatural.